Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming Sitcom video. I want to do a bit of an update with the GeForce GTX 970 memory ROP and other situations which you've probably heard of. So I'm actually a couple of days late to the party of this one, but I decided to cover it anyway because Nvidia have actually made some comments regarding this. Because obviously people aren't too happy, too thrilled about this whole situation. I'll go into it real quick, just in case you're not too familiar. I have covered it in depth several times over, so I'm going to blast through this really fast. Effectively, Nvidia pretty much lied about the specifications of the card, meaning there's less memory bandwidth available, particularly for 512 megabytes of the 4 gigabytes on board, and there's also fewer ROPs, 56 versus 64 that was advertised. And also a smaller amount of level 2 cache, 1.75 megabytes versus 2 megabytes, which I admit might sound very tiny, but in reality it does make quite a bit of difference into performance. However, as I said, Nvidia have commented on this, although there seems to be a bit of confusion over Nvidia. So to begin with, there was a post on the GeForce forums. This is actually from PC World that I'm grabbing this particular quote from, because Nvidia have since clarified the statement, but it originally began as, and I quote, "It sucks because we're really proud of this thing. The GTX 970 is an amazing card and I genuinely believe it's the best card for the money that you can buy. We're working on a driver update that will tune what's allocated where in the memory to further improve performance." Then Peter S, once again, he's an employer, he's an Nvidia employer, and he says, and I quote, "Actually, I'm not really sure that it's a simple issue with just one cause. Card memory is used not just for the frame buffer, but plenty of driver stuff gets loaded in there as well. We're looking to stick in as much of that stuff as possible into the 0.5 gigabytes of space to leave the rest available." In other words, to translate what he's saying, it's not just graphics assets. So for example, in this case, it's not just, let's say, textures or lighting and all of the other crap that goes to make the scene. He's also saying it's also drivers, it's, you know, basically the way that Windows communicates with the graphics cards and so on. It's, you know, commands from the CPU and all of this other stuff is all held there, which is fair enough. You know, that is just the reality of how graphics cards work at the moment. Hopefully DirectX 12 is going to squeeze some of that down, and of course Valve's backing another API, GL Next, and of course you've got AMD with Mantle. But for now, what we've got typically, especially on an Nvidia card, is how it is. But there was a follow-up. So this follow-up actually appeared on the 30th of January. Someone tweeted Nvidia GeForce, "Do you guys have a time frame for the GTX 970 driver update?" In other words, what we've just discussed. And they said, and I quote, this is from Nvidia, we are always improving performance of those drivers, but there are no plans for an update specifically for the GTX 970. Someone else tweeted them, "Well, sure, of course, but what about this?" And then obviously pointing references to what we've just discussed. And then someone else responded, "Well, it's actually kind of a miscommunication on our part. Any improvements will be made to drivers are designed to help all GeForce cards." So that's a bit odd, to be totally honest, and a little bit of a head scratcher. So originally, the quote from the GeForce forums, it made it sound like they were going to try and put the let's say the overhead stuff, in other words, the drivers and the stuff that doesn't necessarily require the high-end performance, it was going to be put into the slower region of memory on the card, right? The one that's got considerably less memory bandwidth. It's literally got an eighth of the memory bandwidth of the other 3.5 gigs. So people were quite happy about that because they figured, hey, alright, that effectively means that the card is going to perform pretty well because the card's going to be optimizing it. And people were like, okay, well, that could work. They could maybe kind of patch it so it's only accessing that part of the memory. But now it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And to be totally honest, I think that kind of sucks. I would like to point out, however, that if you're running at, let's say, 1440p with high levels of anti-aliasing or you're running at 4K, this probably will not affect you if you're running with a single card, because you're probably going to become more actually GPU performance bound. In other words, you don't have enough physical computing power on the actual GPU to run it, so memory bandwidth be damned. In other words, it's not just a memory bandwidth problem, it's fill rate and every other problem as well. But with that said, for those who are running SLI rigs, then it kind of sucks a bit more, because obviously one fairly cheap solution for high resolutions, and one that I've actually kind of recommended a couple of times myself, and now I feel a bit bad about, although it's not really my fault, and that would be GTX 970 in SLI, because they're really good in terms of the price and theoretically the performance to just kind of go out and buy that. So it's just something to bear in mind. And obviously the GTX 970 being released, as well as the 980, but especially the 970, really helped force AMD's hand to actually reduce the price of the 290 as well as the 290X, which technically are available in 8GB flavors as well, but for the most part, you know, most people are probably going to want to stick with 4 gigs unless you're running in some insane resolution with a lot of graphics cards. It's probably not worth it, at least in my personal opinion anywho. So as I said, I do wish Nvidia would clear the situation up. They have, on the other hand, started to try and help people who want to get refunds or exchange credits. But this is for those who feel extremely angry over the GTX 970 situation, in which case he's going to speak to, that would be the same person who gave the initial quotes. In other words, we're looking to stick that stuff into the 4.5 gigabytes of space. So he's going to be basically trying to help speak to manufacturers. In other words, let's, for example, EVGA, and say, hey, can this person have a refund because they're pretty pissed? So that's a good bit of PR, and I think that's good. But what I would like is, and as far as I understand it anyway from my research, and maybe I've missed it, I would like for Nvidia to say, hey, all GTX 970 owners get another free game or something, or a coupon that gives them $50 or £50 or something off of the new card. I think that would be kind of cool, and it would at the very least show a little bit of remorse. And you know what, I think that we shouldn't hold in, I don't think we should literally beat Nvidia over the head with this, because all companies screw up. So I'm not saying we should never, you know, forgive them. I'm not saying you should never ever buy an Nvidia product again. I am saying, however, that we should, as consumers, keep and make sure that they realize that they are accountable, at least for giving some measure of compensation, and then in the future, if they do good, excellent, you know, then, you know, kind of let them know, hey, this is a really awesome product, we're really happy with it. And that's the best way, I think, to do things. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.